And I don't think either of those two would have been able to cope. They'd been anywhere else. And that was the only good thing that happened, was that they were...
The royal who never cries finally broke down. Princess Anne, known for her iron will and unshakable composure, was recently seen in tears over something connected to Diana. For decades, people have whispered about secrets Diana took to her grave, mysteries that the palace worked hard to keep buried. Now, new information has surfaced that's shaking the very foundation of what we thought we knew about Diana's life. A discovery so shocking that even Princess Anne, the strongest woman in the royal family, couldn't hold back her emotions when the truth finally came to light. Could there really be something about Diana that the royal family has been hiding all these years? Stay with us as we dive deep into the revelation that brought Princess Anne to tears and changed everything we thought we knew about the people's princess.
It's what Princess Diana would have done. The people's princess, a royal with a common touch.
The envelope that changed everything. Something arrived at Princess Anne's residence that she wasn't expecting. In today's world where everything moves at lightning speed, physical mail hardly gets anyone's attention anymore. But this particular piece of correspondence was different. It didn't have the usual royal markings or official stamps, just a plain envelope with an old-fashioned wax seal, the kind you rarely see these days. Anne almost handed it off to her staff like she does with hundreds of other letters every week. But something made her pause. Some instinct told her to open this one herself. When she broke the seal and pulled out what was inside, her world tilted sideways. It was a document from a private genetics laboratory, the type that handles sensitive cases for people who need complete discretion. Anne's eyes scanned the page, and there it was. Diana's name, clear as day on an official DNA test result, and right below it, another name she had never seen in any family record, any official document, anything related to the royal family. The laboratory's conclusion was written in scientific language that left absolutely no room for doubt or misinterpretation. A confirmed biological match, a direct genetic connection between Diana and someone who officially didn't exist in any royal records anywhere. Anne sat there staring at the paper, her hands beginning to shake. Her mind raced with questions that had no immediate answers. Who had sent this to her? How had they gotten access to this information? Why was this surfacing now, so many years after Diana's death? And most terrifyingly, what was she supposed to do with knowledge of this explosive? She thought back to all those years when Diana was alive, all the strange moments that never quite made sense. Diana would sometimes get this distant look in her eyes during family gatherings, like she was carrying a tremendous weight that no one else could see or understand. She would make comments that seemed odd at the time, cryptic statements that people dismissed as Diana being overly emotional or dramatic. But maybe Diana hadn't been dramatic at all. Maybe she had been trying to communicate something vitally important, and nobody had been paying close enough attention to hear what she was really saying. The implications of what Anne was holding began to crash over her in waves. The royal family's entire legitimacy and authority rest on bloodlines being absolutely clear and completely undisputed. Everyone needs to know exactly who belongs where in the family tree, who has rights to what titles and privileges, who stands where in the line of succession to the throne. This single piece of paper threatened all of that carefully maintained order. It wasn't just a private family secret that could be quietly managed. It was potentially a full-blown constitutional crisis waiting to explode into public view. Anne carefully folded the document and locked it away in her private desk, but even as she turned the key, she knew there was no truly locking away what she had just learned. The truth has a way of demanding attention and refusing to stay hidden, no matter how many locks you put on it. And this truth about Diana had apparently been waiting patiently in the shadows for someone to finally discover it and bring it into the light. Following the trail, Diana left behind. Sleep became nearly impossible for Anne in the days after that discovery. She would lie awake hour after hour, her mind replaying every conversation she'd ever had with Diana, every family interaction, every moment that had seemed slightly off or unusual. Diana had been trying to tell them something. Anne was now absolutely certain of it. All those strange comments and mysterious behaviors that people had dismissed suddenly started making perfect sense when viewed through this new lens. Diana had been deliberately leaving breadcrumbs along a trail, hoping that someone would eventually be brave enough and perceptive enough to follow where they led. Anne made a decision that went completely against every instinct she'd been trained to follow as a royal. She needed to dig deeper into Diana's personal belongings, the private things that had been carefully stored away after her tragic death in Paris.
A tragic death for a shy girl who was thrust into the public eye. A woman of grace and compassion.
I know that I can give love. For a minute, for half an hour, for a day, for a month.
Not the public material that everyone knew about or could easily access, but Diana's truly private possessions, her personal journals that she kept hidden from palace staff and family members, letters she'd written to trusted friends who existed completely outside the royal circle, the real pieces of her inner life that the family had boxed up and tucked away in climate-controlled storage rooms where they wouldn't deteriorate, but also wouldn't be easily found. Going through Diana's journals felt like reading about a completely different person than the one the public had known. Most entries seemed fairly normal on the surface, nothing that would raise immediate red flags. Diana wrote candidly about her daily struggles with royal life, her complicated feelings about the constant and suffocating media attention, her observations about family dynamics, and the cold formality of palace interactions. But scattered throughout the pages were phrases that now jumped off the paper at Anne like they were written in neon ink. Diana mentioned having to protect something far too precious to risk exposure and making heartbreaking sacrifices to keep them completely safe from this brutal world. She wrote cryptically about leaving pieces of truth, hidden where the right person will eventually find them when the time finally comes. These weren't just random musings or emotional outbursts from a troubled woman. They were deliberate messages, warnings left for whoever would come looking, instructions for someone who cared enough to piece together the puzzle Diana had so carefully constructed. Anne felt a chill run down her spine as she realized Diana had been planning for this moment, perhaps even counting on it happening one day. Anne pulled Diana's old travel records from palace archives and started comparing them line by line with what she was reading in the journals. The official palace logs showed a predictable schedule of charity events, public appearances, and pre-planned royal engagements. But Diana's private calendar, the one she kept for herself, told a strikingly different story. There were gaps, unexplained absences, days marked simply as personal time or private retreat, with absolutely no explanation of where she'd actually gone or what she'd been doing. These mysterious disappearances happened with surprising regularity throughout the late 1980s, always explained away with deliberately vague statements about needing rest or wanting privacy from the relentless press attention. The palace had accepted these explanations without serious question back then, probably relieved to have any break from the intense media circus that surrounded Diana's every move. When Anne carefully lined up those unexplained absences with the dates on the DNA test and cross-referenced them with the journal entries, a pattern emerged that was absolutely impossible to ignore or dismiss as coincidence. Diana had been systematically and deliberately creating space in her schedule. Blocks of time when official palace eyes weren't watching her movements. Carefully planned opportunities to slip away to places where she wouldn't be instantly recognized or followed by the photographers who normally documented her every public appearance. Further investigation led Anne to correspondence between Diana and people she'd kept completely separate and isolated from her royal life. Friends Diana had cultivated who had zero connection to aristocratic circles, palace politics, or the traditional royal social network. In letters written to these carefully chosen, trusted confidants, Diana was far more open and honest than she ever allowed herself to be with family members. She wrote about arrangements made to protect someone who couldn't possibly protect themselves, and expressed deep heartbreak about having to love from an impossible distance. The letters were extremely carefully worded, never once using specific names or concrete details that could be traced back to any actual person or place. But the raw emotional truth bleeding through every single line was completely impossible to miss or misinterpret. Anne discovered multiple references to a specific private medical clinic somewhere in Europe that Diana had mentioned several times in her journal. She described it as a place where she felt truly invisible for the first time in years and could breathe without feeling watched. When Anne had private researchers quietly look into it, operating completely outside normal palace channels, they found a small, exclusive medical facility tucked away in the Swiss countryside that specialized in providing absolutely discreet care for extremely wealthy clients who needed total privacy. Medical records from the late 1980s showed a birth registered there with deliberately and suspiciously incomplete information. No father listed anywhere in the documentation. Only minimal identifying details about the mother that couldn't be easily connected to anyone specific. Just barely enough official documentation to satisfy basic legal requirements, but nowhere near enough actual information to trace anyone's real identity back to their actual life. The name of the attending physician leapt out at Anne the moment she saw it. She recognized it immediately from old palace records. He'd been an official royal family doctor years ago, someone who had enjoyed direct personal access to the family and their complete professional trust. Then suddenly, without any real warning or adequate explanation, he'd abruptly resigned from his prestigious position and quietly moved abroad. At the time, the official palace story had been something deliberately vague about him wanting a quieter, simpler life away from the pressures and demands of London. But now, viewed through the lens of what Anne was uncovering, that sudden departure looked completely and utterly different. It looked exactly like someone being carefully and quietly moved out of the picture before they could become a serious problem or potentially leak damaging information to the wrong people. Every single thing Anne was uncovering pointed relentlessly toward the same shocking and almost unbelievable conclusion. Diana had given birth to a child that the general public and even most of the royal family knew absolutely nothing about. A child who had been deliberately and systematically hidden from view, given a completely false identity, and raised far away from anything even remotely connected to the Windsor family or British royal life. And someone with serious institutional power and significant influence had personally orchestrated the entire elaborate cover-up, making absolutely certain that every possible trace was methodically and completely erased from all official records. Anne felt physically sick to her stomach as she slowly realized just how deep and how extensive this deception actually went. This wasn't just some simple family secret that accidentally got buried over time and forgotten. This was a carefully planned, deliberately executed, organized effort to make an entire human being effectively disappear from recorded history. The brother who knew all along. Armed with all the damning evidence she'd painstakingly gathered over weeks of secret investigation, Anne knew exactly who she needed to confront first. Her brother Charles had been positioned at the absolute center of Diana's life during those critical years in the late 80s. If anyone in the entire family knew the complete truth about a hidden child, it would definitely be him. She found him alone in his private study late one evening, the fire burning low in the hearth and casting long dancing shadows across the wood-paneled walls. Anne didn't waste a single second with polite small talk or try to ease gently into the uncomfortable subject. She walked straight across the room to his desk and placed the DNA report directly in front of him with a firm hand. Then she simply stood there waiting, watching his face extremely carefully for any reaction. Charles's immediate reaction told her absolutely everything she needed to know without him speaking a single word. He didn't look shocked or confused or caught off guard. He didn't pick up the paper with puzzled curiosity and ask what it was or where it had come from. He just stared down at it with this deeply weary expression of complete acceptance, like he'd always known deep down that this day would eventually arrive and had been quietly dreading it for decades. That particular look was somehow far worse and more damning than any verbal confession could possibly have been. It meant he'd been consciously carrying this enormous knowledge around with him all these years, living with it every single day, pretending everything was perfectly normal while knowing full well that this explosive secret could surface at literally any moment and destroy everything. Anne's questions came pouring out harsh and demanding, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. How long had he actually known? Why hadn't he told anyone in the family? How could he have possibly allowed Diana to die with this massive secret still completely buried? Charles didn't even attempt to dodge her direct accusations or deny anything she was saying. He just sat there in his leather chair, silently taking the full force of her justified rage, until she finally ran completely out of words and energy. Then he started slowly explaining, and the detached, clinical way he talked about the whole situation made Anne's blood run absolutely cold. He spoke in this emotionless, matter-of-fact tone, like he was calmly describing a difficult political decision or business strategy, instead of talking about deliberately hiding an actual human being's entire existence. He admitted everything without the slightest hesitation or apparent shame. Yes, there absolutely was another child. Yes, he'd known about it since well before Diana's tragic death in Paris. Yes, there had been a very calculated, carefully thought-out plan to keep it completely and permanently hidden from the entire world. Charles explained in disturbing detail how critical decisions were made at the very highest levels of palace authority after Diana died. The monarchy was already dealing with absolutely massive public criticism and intensely negative scrutiny following years of scandals. The divorce had been publicly damaging enough on its own. Diana's sudden death had created an unprecedented crisis of public confidence in the institution.
Diana was killed there early today in a car crash along with companion Dodi Al-Fayed and a chauffeur,
revealing another heir born completely outside traditional royal channels at that particular moment would have been utterly and absolutely catastrophic for the monarchy's survival. So the hard decision was made by senior advisors and family members. Bury it completely. Immediately seal all related records. Relocate the child under a totally new identity with fabricated documentation. Make absolutely certain beyond any doubt that no possible trail could ever lead anyone back to the real truth. Charles justified everything by repeatedly talking about duty and institutional survival taking priority over everything else. The monarchy had to continue functioning no matter what. That was the overriding priority that automatically trumped absolutely everything else without exception. Individual lives, individual truths, even basic human decency and compassion, all of it necessarily came second to keeping the ancient institution intact and continuing to function. He spoke about the entire situation like he was describing a genuinely difficult but completely unavoidable strategic choice, something any truly reasonable person in his unique position would have done under those exact same impossible circumstances. Anne absolutely exploded at him then, her careful royal composure finally shattering completely. She furiously reminded him of Diana's many years of visible suffering, how she desperately struggled against an institutional system that was steadily crushing her spirit and identity, how Diana had repeatedly tried to fight back and push for change and been systematically silenced and dismissed every single time. Diana had specifically warned close friends that the machine, as she bitterly called it, would ultimately destroy anyone who seriously threatened its carefully maintained public image and smooth operation. And here was Charles, sitting right in front of her, living absolute proof that Diana had been completely and totally right all along. He'd been an active, willing part of that heartless machine. He'd consciously chosen to protect the cold institution over protecting basic truth, even when that terrible choice meant hiding and denying his own child's very existence. Charles didn't even try to defend his past actions or justify them further. He just sat there in heavy, oppressive silence, quietly accepting her burning rage like he'd mentally rehearsed this exact confrontation in his mind literally thousands of times over the years. When he finally spoke again after a long pause, he said something about duty, sometimes requiring impossible sacrifices that people outside the unique pressures of royal life could never fully understand or appreciate. It was the exact same tired excuse that generation after generation of royals had used throughout history to justify all kinds of morally questionable and sometimes truly terrible decisions. But hearing those familiar words come directly from her own brother's mouth about something this deeply personal and this genuinely devastating felt like an unforgivable betrayal that Anne knew she could never move past, breaking the silence forever. Days turned into weeks as Anne wrestled with what to do with this terrible knowledge. She could keep it buried like everyone else had done for decades. She could protect the institution like she'd been trained to do her entire life. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Diana's face. She remembered all the pain Diana had carried, all the times she'd tried to speak the truth and been shut down. Anne realized she had a choice to make: loyalty to an institution that had hidden a child's existence, or loyalty to the truth that Diana had died trying to protect. The decision didn't come easily.
Princess Anne, she is the hardest working royal last year and for many, many years.
Anne spent sleepless nights thinking about the consequences. Going public would trigger chaos. Constitutional experts would debate succession rights. Parliament would demand investigations. The carefully maintained image of the monarchy would shatter into pieces. Her relationship with Charles would never recover. The family would likely never forgive her. But the alternative was continuing the lie, letting Diana's child remain erased from history and becoming part of the same machine that had destroyed Diana. Anne made her choice. She arranged a meeting with trusted journalists, providing them with copies of everything she'd discovered: the DNA report, Diana's journal entries, the medical records from Switzerland, the travel documents that proved Diana's secret trips. All of it. She knew there would be no going back once this information became public. The palace would deny it at first. They'd call it fake news or tabloid nonsense. But the evidence was too strong. The scientific proof was undeniable. When the story broke, it exploded across every news outlet in the world. Headlines screamed about Diana's hidden child. Social media went into absolute chaos. Millions of people who had loved Diana felt betrayed by the institution that had hidden this truth for so long. Thousands of others defended the monarchy, arguing that sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good. The debate raged on every platform, in every country, across every generation. Princess Anne gave only one statement to the press. Standing in front of cameras with tears streaming down her face for the first time in public memory, she spoke directly to Diana's hidden child, wherever they might be. She apologized on behalf of the family. She acknowledged the terrible wrong that had been done. She promised that Diana had never wanted this, had never stopped loving them, and had done everything possible to leave a trail of truth for someone to eventually find. Anne's voice broke as she said that Diana's greatest wish had been for her child to one day be acknowledged and welcomed into the light. The palace scrambled to respond. Charles issued a formal statement expressing regret for past decisions made under extraordinary circumstances. Camilla remained silent. Prince William and Harry, shocked by the revelation that they had another sibling they'd never known about, struggled to process the news privately. The Church of England raised questions about succession and legitimacy. Constitutional lawyers argued about whether this changed anything legally or was simply a matter of historical record. But through all the chaos and debate and institutional scrambling, one truth remained crystal clear. Diana had been right all along. She had tried to tell people that secrets were being kept, that the truth was being buried, that the machine valued its image over human lives. And Princess Anne, by choosing to bring Diana's final secret into the light, had proven that sometimes the strongest act of loyalty isn't protecting an institution. It's honoring the truth that someone died trying to preserve. The world will never look at the royal family the same way again. The myth of perfect transparency has been shattered. But Diana's child, wherever they are, now knows that their mother never forgot them. That she left clues hoping someone would care enough to follow them. And that finally, after decades of silence, Princess Anne cared enough about truth to let the whole world know that Diana's love extended further than anyone had been allowed to know. If this story moved you, if you believe Diana's truth deserved to finally be told,
30 years ago today, Princess Diana gave that explosive panorama interview revealing her struggles with bulimia and the troubles within her marriage.
then make sure you hit that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update, because this story is still developing and there's so much more to uncover about what really happened behind palace walls. Share this video with everyone who loved Diana and believes the truth matters more than protecting institutions' darkest fears and suspicions. The secret vault contained not just a few missing pieces, but an extensive collection of royal artifacts that had been systematically removed from their rightful locations over many months. Each stolen item was carefully catalogued with false documentation designed to obscure its true origin and legitimate ownership, revealing months or possibly years of meticulous planning and deliberate theft on an unprecedented scale. The confrontation that shook the crown. With irrefutable evidence finally in her possession and a moral obligation that could no longer be delayed, Princess Anne prepared for what would become the most explosive confrontation in modern royal history. The meeting she arranged would take place at Clarence House, Camilla's official London residence, and would forever alter the balance of power within the royal family while establishing new boundaries that no one would dare cross again. Anne arrived without any diplomatic courtesy or advance warning that might have allowed Camilla time to prepare defenses or craft believable explanations. She was accompanied by two senior royal advisors, whose mere presence immediately signaled the extraordinary gravity of the situation and the institutional authority behind Anne's mission. This wasn't a family discussion or social courtesy call. This was official crown business of the highest possible order. The confrontation began with Anne methodically laying out her evidence like a skilled prosecutor, building an airtight case for a jury. Each photograph was placed deliberately on the polished mahogany conference table. Each document was explained in precise legal detail, and each piece of witness testimony was presented without emotion or personal bias. The accumulated evidence spoke powerfully for itself, creating an absolutely overwhelming case that left no room whatsoever for misinterpretation, innocent explanation, or plausible denial. Camilla found herself suddenly and unexpectedly confronted with undeniable photographic proof of her systematic appropriation of treasures that belonged not to her personally, regardless of her marriage, title, or position, but to the British Crown and, by extension,
in 2005, she became the Duchess of Cornwall, officially a member of the royal family.
to the people of Britain who had supported and cherished these symbols of their national heritage for countless generations. Her initial response followed a predictable pattern that Anne had anticipated: immediate categorical denial, followed by increasingly desperate attempts to explain away the mountain of evidence as nothing more than administrative confusion, clerical errors, or innocent misunderstandings that had occurred during the emotionally charged period immediately following Elizabeth's unexpected death. However, Anne had prepared meticulously for exactly these deflections and possessed counter-evidence for every possible excuse. She calmly produced detailed historical inventory records, some dating back decades, showing conclusively that the missing pieces had been specifically designated for particular recipients according to Elizabeth's explicit written wishes and formal testamentary instructions that had been properly witnessed and legally documented. The emerald necklace, for instance, had been formally designated for Princess Charlotte, Elizabeth's beloved great-granddaughter, as a tangible symbol of continuity between past and future generations of royal women. The precious Victorian brooch was intended specifically for Anne herself in recognition of her lifetime of selfless service to the crown and as a representation of the sacred bond connecting royal women across the centuries. As the weight of evidence continued mounting higher and higher, creating an insurmountable wall of proof, Camilla's carefully maintained public composure began cracking under the intense pressure. Her voice became increasingly strained and defensive. Her gestures grew more agitated and erratic, and her explanations became progressively more illogical and internally contradictory. Recognizing that outright denial was no longer sustainable in the face of such overwhelming proof, Camilla desperately shifted her strategy to moral justification and righteous indignation. She claimed with rising anger that as queen consort, she possessed both the legal right and moral responsibility to safeguard Elizabeth's precious legacy in whatever manner she personally deemed most appropriate and beneficial for the monarchy's long-term interests. Anne's eyes narrowed as she leaned slightly forward, her voice calm but edged with steel. The advisors beside her said nothing, yet their silence carried the full weight of institutional authority. Every word Anne spoke was not just her own judgment, it was the voice of history, tradition, and the crown itself. She reminded Camilla that monarchy survived not by personal ambition, but by honoring trust, heritage, and duty. Breaking those sacred principles, Anne declared, was not only a betrayal of the late queen, but also a direct assault on the moral foundation of the entire royal institution. Anne's response was as swift as it was absolutely devastating. Authority and respect aren't automatically granted through marriage certificates, she declared with the icy precision that had made her legendary throughout royal circles. They must be earned through decades of genuine service, personal sacrifice, and unwavering dedication to something greater than oneself. She reminded Camilla with brutal directness that Elizabeth's final wishes regarding these irreplaceable treasures had been crystal clear, meticulously documented by legal professionals, and that no title, however recently acquired through matrimony, gave anyone the authority to override or ignore the late queen's explicit instructions regarding the careful distribution of her most cherished and historically significant possessions. Elizabeth's testament and the final victory. As the royal scandal threatened to tear the monarchy apart and expose decades of carefully guarded secrets, an extraordinary discovery emerged that would provide the final, absolutely decisive evidence in Princess Anne's relentless campaign for justice. Deep within the most secure sections of the royal archives, sealed since Elizabeth's passing and marked only with her distinctive personal cipher, lay a handwritten letter that would completely vindicate Anne's actions and expose the full magnitude of Camilla's betrayal. Elizabeth's final testament wasn't a formal legal document prepared by teams of lawyers and witnessed by court officials, but something infinitely more powerful and emotionally devastating, a deeply personal letter expressing her most profound concerns about the future of her treasured collection. Written in her unmistakable, elegant script during her final months of life, this remarkable document revealed the late queen's intimate thoughts and carefully considered fears about what might happen to her most precious possessions after her inevitable death. The letter described each historically significant piece not in terms of monetary value or insurance appraisals, but in terms of deep emotional connection to British heritage and the sacred responsibility to preserve these artifacts for future generations. Elizabeth had written with remarkable prescience about her specific concerns regarding Camilla's character and true motivations, expressing genuine worry that the new queen consort might view these irreplaceable treasures primarily as symbols of personal status and authority rather than sacred trusts to be carefully preserved and eventually passed on according to established traditions. Most devastatingly for Camilla's crumbling position, Elizabeth had explicitly and unambiguously named Anne as the primary guardian of her legacy, writing in her own hand that Anne understands better than anyone in our family the true meaning of service, sacrifice, and dedication to something greater than personal ambition. This wasn't merely a mother's emotional preference, it was a direct, legally significant command from Britain's longest-serving monarch that left absolutely no room for interpretation, challenge, or legal maneuvering. When Anne solemnly presented this extraordinary letter to the assembled senior royal advisors during an emergency meeting, the effect was immediate, profound, and completely transformative. Any lingering doubts about her authority to act evaporated instantly. Institutional loyalties realigned themselves permanently, and the tide of official support shifted decisively and irreversibly in her favor. The revelation forced a climactic meeting at Balmoral Castle, the royal family's most private and emotionally significant retreat, where Anne and Camilla would face each other in a final confrontation that would determine the future direction of the monarchy itself. With the Duke of Kent serving as an impartial witness to ensure fairness and prevent future disputes, the two most powerful women in the royal family prepared for a battle that would leave permanent scars on the institution. The evidence arrayed against Camilla was now completely overwhelming and utterly undeniable. The photographic documentation, witness testimonies, historical records, and Elizabeth's own handwritten condemnation created a case so legally and morally strong that even the most skilled legal minds couldn't have found any viable defense strategy. Faced with the absolute certainty of complete public exposure and the inevitable destruction of her carefully cultivated image, Camilla finally capitulated entirely. She agreed with obvious reluctance and barely concealed humiliation to return every single stolen piece to the official royal collection, but only under the strict condition that the entire scandal would never be discussed publicly and that the royal family would maintain absolute silence about the matter forever. Anne accepted this compromise solely for the sake of institutional stability and protecting the monarchy's public reputation. But her steady, unwavering gaze made one thing absolutely clear. Silence about the matter did not mean forgiveness for the betrayal, and her future vigilance would be constant and utterly uncompromising. As their historic final confrontation reached its conclusion, Anne delivered one last warning that would echo through Camilla's memory for the remainder of her life. Attempt to betray the crown again in any way, and there will be no mercy, no second chances, and no private resolution to protect your reputation. In the weeks that followed this dramatic confrontation, the stolen treasures quietly returned to their rightful places within the official royal collection, carefully examined by experts, properly catalogued according to historical protocols, and restored to their designated positions within secure royal repositories. The restoration process was never publicly acknowledged, and the general public remained completely unaware of the explosive scandal that had nearly destroyed the monarchy from within. Yet within the ancient walls of Britain's royal palaces, everything had changed irrevocably and permanently. Princess Anne emerged from this crisis as the undisputed guardian of royal integrity, calm in her strength, fierce in her dedication, and absolutely uncompromising in her commitment to preserving the monarchy's most sacred traditions for future generations. Her methodical investigation, fearless confrontation, and ultimate victory established new boundaries of acceptable behavior that no one would dare challenge again. Camilla retained her official position beside King Charles and continued appearing at state functions, but her authority within the royal family was forever diminished, her ambitions permanently scarred by the knowledge that Anne was constantly watching and waiting for any sign of future misconduct or betrayal. This explosive royal drama proved that even within Britain's most powerful family, there are those willing to sacrifice personal relationships and family harmony to protect what truly matters: heritage, duty, and the sacred trust between the monarchy and the people it serves. Princess Anne's victory demonstrated that some battles are absolutely worth fighting regardless of personal cost, and that the greatest triumphs are sometimes those hidden from public view. What's your take on this incredible story of royal betrayal and ultimate justice? Did Anne handle this crisis correctly by maintaining secrecy to protect the monarchy's reputation, or should the British people have learned the truth about Camilla's shocking actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more explosive revelations from inside the world's most famous family. Every twist in this saga reminds us that even behind palace walls, power struggles, secrets, and betrayal can shake the throne. Do you believe Anne's silence preserved stability, or did it deny the public their right to know the truth?